call it banks, where you can do it all of a sudden in far fewer people and faster in time. And so this is why Ava Labs has been huge in creating what we call real world assets. We've helped Apollo and KKR tokenize funds, working with Citi in order to tokenize repos to allow FX settlement to go faster, working with banks like ANZ to tokenize stable coins in all different currencies in Asia. These are all taking existing value, tokenizing it, and putting it on chain. And that's been part of the last wave. And that's also going to be a trend that continues to help create the next billion users. But there's another trend that's just forming now in this next wave. And this next wave, this trend is not just about taking existing value and putting it on chain. It is about creating new value. And this is by making it seamless in your life so you can just be you online and then get the rewards that you'd get in your physical life. Now, we all know Helium. For those who don't, it is a Wi-Fi network that allows you to share your excess broadband capacity. So it's so simple. What you do is you get a Helium router, you attach that to whatever your broadband provider is, whether it's AT&T or Verizon, you attach it, and suddenly you're part of a mesh network that is secure and that allows you to share broadband basically that you're not using. And guess what? You get rewarded for it. You get a Helium token. Now, the great thing about this now is you can get rewarded with this Helium token, and then you can swap it out for a mobile token, a different token that they're creating. And suddenly you can use these things, your phone, because by paying it with the new mobile token that you earn from sharing your capacity. Avalanche will have a similar project come aboard very shortly. I wish I can tell you more about it, but not yet. Just follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I'll be talking about it very shortly. But in the meantime, I think probably the average bill for a year in mobile is probably somewhere between $1,200 to $1,500 per person a year, maybe a little more, a little less, depending on your plan. But the point is, just think about no longer having to pay $1,200 to $1,500 in order to have your mobile service. In fact, maybe you get paid $1,200 to $1,500 in order to run around with your Apple phone. That's kind of cool. There are going to be certain verticals where this world of creating value that wasn't there before and making your life more seamless, I think will lead the charge in creating the next billion users. One area is what I call the NFT / loyalty. There you go. A lot of us know NFTs as digital cartoons. They were fun, but probably not a lot of terminal value in those things. Well, their non-fungible tokens now are actually creating value in a different way. We are working with a lot of, frankly, brands that are trying to experiment in how business models can change in the way they engage with their users and creating value for their users at the same time. This is a true story. The other day, I came home from work. I just wanted to chill out with my wife and watch Netflix. So I tried to download the app on my smart TV. I think it was an LG TV or something. So it wasn't downloading. It wasn't working. So I turned to my wife and I say, do you know how to make this Netflix app work on this LG TV? And she said no. So what do? I pick up my iPad, literally this one, and I'm a creature of habit. I have a Chrome app on it. So I go to Chrome. I start searching how to download properly the Netflix. The first search response, literally, these were the words. Hi, John. It looks like you're having trouble on your LG TV in downloading. You have error XY1567 or whatever. And we recommend these 4 solutions. Creepy. Very creepy. That is how hyper customized this is. Now, I can't solve for all of that, but we are working with a partner called Feature.io that actually does have a partnership with Netflix. And if you watch this series, Love, Death, and Robots, they will automatically stream NFT collectibles as rewards for just sitting there and watching the show, allowing you to be you and owning and rewarding. It's so easy. So they are creating basically partnerships with platforms like Netflix and maybe YouTube, and also with creators, so that all you do is sit there, do what you do, watch what you watch, and then you're going to get reward points by watching trailers, music videos, shows, or whatever. You can stream, watch shows, and you get rewarded for it. And it's so easy. What you do is you go to their site, you enter your email, a wallet is auto-generated that's linked to your email, and then go watch and you get to collect. And with those collectibles that you get in your wallet, you get to trade it for other collectibles. Maybe you just want to hold it. Or the thought is one day, maybe that will earn you $15 off of your Netflix subscription, or a full month off of your Netflix subscription, or you get YouTube Premium for free, allowing you to be you, owning your data and getting value out of it. That is pretty cool. Go back one more slide. Yeah, perfect. So a lot of these multi-brand companies we're working with, Warner Brothers, many IP products. The most recent one, Coachella, it's actually owned by this group called AEG Anschutz, a guy who basically in his group owns many rights to live events. So Coachella was a music festival that recently happened. And what they've done is if you buy their ticket through their NFT and go to Coachella, they've gamified the experience, allowing you to do things at the actual concert, the festival, and earn points, even more points, and to engage with you. And then they will also now sync that up with all their other festivals, so you can aggregate all of those points. And maybe you will use those points to get first access to a hard to get to concert where they will be able to allow you to get access to. Now, it's creating value for you just by being you, but for them, they now directly engage with their customer, you, and they no longer have to go and purchase customer acquisition costs through Google or Facebook through marketing in order to reacquire you. And it's great because that means their income statements and their cost expenses on income statements will go down and their margins will improve. So it's good for them. It's good for you because you get rewarded for just being you efficiently. And it's actually good for creators because some of the value will go back to the actual creators of the content. Another vertical that we're super, super excited about is gaming. In gaming, there's a company called Nexon. It's a 15 billion market cap company, publicly traded in Asia. They have a game called Maple Story. Some of you may actually have played it in the past before. The Web 2 version of Maple Story has 260 million users. They are now going to create a blockchain-enabled version of Maple Story on the Avalanche blockchain. Now, if we get just 1% of these 260 million users using a blockchain-enabled solution, that's a nice dent into the next billion users on Web3. And that's what we're gunning for. But there are other games, real games that cost. Shrapnel, perfect example. Shrapnel is a first-person multi-MMORPG game. Shrapnel, the publishers of it and the creators of it are tried and true AAA publishers. They have raised over or close to $100 million to create this game, and they are enabling it through a blockchain solution. It is a very good game. You want to turn on the video for a second to check it out? While it's syncing, you will be able. I'll explain. I'll still talk. This is a legitimate game with real gaming, incredible gaming, um, video and gameplay. And they're going to create basically in-game asset market on Avalanche. You're going to be able to buy and sell these upgrades that you just saw. Finally, you're going to have real gaming and you're going to reap the benefits of it from your excellence in playing as opposed to paying to play these games. And this is a trend, and I predict in 5 years, you're not even going to know that it's on parts of this is on a blockchain, and you're just going to find out what games you want to play, and you're going to reap the rewards for just being you. And that's going to be also great in terms of making another dent into the next billion users. Next slide. We'll go to that. A very new area here, SocialFi. Now this is very new, but there's a team, really good guys called the Arena. It's basically Twitter, but decentralized. And we all know TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, those two are both owned actually by Meta. These, let's call it social networks, actually are the most egregious in the sense that you actually, everyone here creates all the content. You are also the users, and yet they extract all the Schumpeterian rents that they get and take 99% of the value through advertising. And none of it goes to you, yet you created the content for them. Stars Arena is by the people for the people. If you want to use it and help grow that network, you get rewarded in tokens. And the only way that it becomes advertising enabled is if you have a token and you put it to a vote and the governance goes through and everyone decides that we want advertising, and then that advertising actually will accrue to you, the individual, as opposed to the centralized party. That's, I think it's early, but it's a growing concept and it's going to grow. Now, next slide. Okay, so this is so far all about your personal, your leisure self and you being you. There's also a professional side. And I know the timing is getting up, so I'll just give one example. There are, I mean, there's a lot of students in this room. Every student's gonna wanna get a job sometime. What is work? Work is nothing more than trading your time for money in order to live. And there's a whole growing ecosystem of freelancers. But when you think freelancers, you think Web2 traditional marketplaces like Fiverr or Upwork. And they really cater to the employer and the employee. A gentleman by the name of Adam Jackson started Brain Trust. Brain Trust, using a token, has incentivized another party in this, the referrer. There are lots of you here who know a friend who wants a job or needs a job, and you want to help, you don't have the time and you don't know where to go to help support them. So the referrer, may need that little extra incentive through the token to push so that you can help your friend. Or you may have heard that your other friend at a different firm is looking for a job, and you can, but in this world right now, you really don't know what to do with that knowledge, and you can't make a match with those two friends. So maybe but in this world, in the Brain Trust world, you're incentivized and you have a little extra click in your brain. So I got to go there. I'm going to put on that job listing for the employer. Bring all these parties together, incentivizing all these players has actually been hugely successful. In 4 years, Brain Trust now is generating over $100 million of revenue. And a lot of that gets passed on to the referrer, by the way. And they have only 30 people. Fiverr generates about 350 to a little bit around that area in terms of revenue. They have about 900 people. So Fiverr, been around a lot longer, has basically, call it 3 times the revenue and about 30x number of people. This is the power of decentralized world, where the crowdsourced mechanism allows you to, and the composability of code allows you to go to market much faster, and you don't need as many people in your organization, 30 versus 900. I have some other examples, but in the interest of time, I'm gonna get to some of the barriers and some of the reasons why this hasn't happened faster. One is we know, regulation needs to have some clarity. And I have hope that that will happen here in the US. Other regions in the world, Asia and Europe, are far more clear and more certain than the laws and regulations here, but it will happen, and it will happen over time. That's not exactly in my control, but what is in our control, all of our hands, is innovating the UI UX. It is very clunky today to enter Web3, whether you're a user or developer. So what Ava Labs is doing is making that access a lot smoother. In fact, my own devs every once in a while say, I need a GPS for Web3 just to figure out where I'm going. Well, that's what we're building, and it's called Core. You want to run that? This is the mobile version. With partners like MoonPay, we have MTL licenses in order to make these all compliant, and Coinbase for custody, qualified custodian. One simple place for your tokens as well as your NFTs. Hard to find that. Bridging to other chains. And this is the extension version of it coming up next.
If you hold any crypto, you need to know of this website. Core.app is becoming the go-to crypto command. Try and answer this question. How much crypto do you really own? Most people have no idea. Chances are you have crypto across multiple different networks, you have multiple different dApps, and you have multiple different NFTs across multiple networks. How in the world would we simplify that and put it into one place? Core figured that out. As always, I use it. It's becoming kind of popular, so try it for yourself, see if it's for you. The website's just core.app. I'd go there right now. It could save you a lot of time.
It's still early in this, but this is the vision. And in the spirit of Web3, we need all of you to be part of this community and help us iterate and get to that great seamless experience. I know some of you already been in there and you've already been helpful in suggesting improvements, and we're taking note of all of it and we're making those improvements. But this is what Web3 is about. You help build with us and you'll get rewarded with it along the way. And we do it together. Now, for devs, it's the same problem. It is very difficult. And in this case, I want to invite someone up here, Nick Stam, who is a product manager, a former Cornellian. 2 years ago, he was actually the president of the Cornell Blockchain Club, and he's working on this product. He and his team, with another Nick who runs it, are really doing great strides. So all developers can launch their own blockchains easily.
Thanks so much, Sean. Hi everyone. My name is Nick Stam. I'm currently a Web3 solutions architect for Ava Cloud, one of the newest products at Ava Labs. But previously, actually, for those of you who do not know, I was the president of Cornell Blockchain. So I helped run this conference. I'm really excited to be back here today for the third time in 3 years. So I've been working on Ava Cloud, which is our solution to managing and running custom blockchains. Instead of hiring 3 engineers who would take around 6 months of development time, Ava Cloud has automated all of this into a simple and clean UI. So I think there's a next slide. It's a video. So all you have to do is go to avacloud.io. And within minutes, you're in this custom launchpad where you can name your blockchain. Ours is going to be the Cornell blockchain subnet, and you can customize it to your business needs. So there's a whole suite of features that you can decide on for your business, whether it's a financial use case, gaming, social-fi, as John mentioned. And within minutes, our subnet is deployed and ready to use. So this is currently free to use on DevNet. So please, if you want to try it out, go to avacloud.io or scan the QR code. That will take you right there. And I encourage any developer, anyone trying to manage their custom blockchain to try this out.
Thank you, Dick. So it's very simple. I think there is a path to basically this new world where we will build for the next billion users. There's certain verticals that lend well to it. And also there are tools that we need to create. And this is what we're doing at Ava Labs, but we need the community. We need everyone to build this together because that's what decentralized, open, permissionless networks and open innovation is all about. So thank you very much for your time and come build with us. I think we have time for a few questions if anyone asks me or Nick. So Avalanche is the technology, the underlying thing. It's kind of like, think of it almost like AWS. It's just seamless. Ava Labs is a software services company that helps these gaming companies build on top of.
Instead of it using regular currency, I guess on the back end of the game, you're using like whatever Avalanche or USDC or something to make the
The
transaction.
perfect
cheaper.
person here.
Yeah, so a lot of these games are actually using Ava Cloud and launching on a subnet. So they have their own essentially private customizable blockchain that they can open up and connect to the Avalanche primary network like C-Chain that you're probably familiar with.
And is there a smart contract of sorts on the crypto side of it saying, all right, go here, do this, do the whatever on the back end?
Yeah, it's completely implemented in different ways for different use cases, but the core technology of this customizable blockchain that they have is all common and they're all connected to each other.
Maybe one more question or two more or. Wow, they love you.
Yeah, it's similar. I think we sort of think of ourselves more like a platform as a service. So you're coming and you can get different types of hardware for your needs, whether it's like when you launch a blockchain, you need validators, you're gonna need a way to interact with the blockchain, so you need like API and you'll need like an explorer. So Ava Cloud bundles all of those services together and just gives you all of that out of the box. So you can really just focus on building your application. You don't have to worry about all the infrastructure required to spin it up.
Okay, so is the chain that you build from Ava Cloud, is it run on top of Avalanche, or the gas fee is paid by the Ava token?
Yeah, so the design of the Avalanche network consists of the primary network, which is C-Chain that most people are familiar with, and you have the ability to spin up subnets that are connected to the C-Chain through the design of the overall network. So that when you spin up your subnet, you can choose what your gas token is, you can choose what it represents, and you can have your users bridge out through the C-Chain to access all the liquidity there, whether it's the centralized exchange, a DEX, or bridging to another like Ethereum, Solana, etc. Exactly. It's an L1 chain that's connected to this liquidity hub of the C-Chain.
Hi.
So this is regarding the wallet, the core wallet. I wonder if the wallet allows self-custody for all those different assets.
So the answer is there's going to be options. Either you can custody it through qualified custodians like Coinbase, and there will be self-custody as well.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? Just coming back to Ava Cloud again, we have had a number of clients who are looking to use permission chains, private chains sometimes. Some of the concerns are always about the privacy of the transactions alongside with the selective compliance and regulatory options that they may have. Would love to see if how soon Ava Cloud is, or if it is already live, and if it is, then how soon we can engage with some of the large customers that we have.
Yeah, so we are already live, testnets and mainnets deployments. And I think that the best part, in my opinion, about Ava Cloud and subnets is just how much customizability there is. So with regards to privacy, you can lock down the transaction data and the on-chain data as much as you want, as much as the business wants. So if they are the only ones who want to be able to see transactions and then they can filter it out to their customers, you can do that. And you can make it as private or as public as you want.
And I think we have time for one last question, which I think is on this side of the room.
Hello. You briefly touched about how Avalanche is this framework to build your own blockchain, and I heard you mention that they're all connected. Could you touch on how they're all natively connected?
Yeah, so that's a great question. They are natively connected through what we call Avalanche warp messaging, which allows the subnets to talk to each other and to talk to the C chain. And recently, as I'm sure more Ava Labs people will mention later today, recently we launched a protocol called Teleporter, which is the EVM version on top of Avalanche warp messaging. So it allows subnets to natively talk to the C chain and transfer value between it seamlessly.
We have time for one more or no? Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. Nick and I are available for more conversation. And again, thank you, Leah and Amy. It's an incredible event, 800 tickets, absolutely incredible and very profitable too.